Welcome everyone to another exercise in this workbook Statistics, this time focusing on the topic of probability theory. Let's have a look at the exercise. Here we have at the university 48% of the students study general management, 36% study human research management and 16% marketing. 91% of the GM students find a job directly after finishing their studies. For the HRM students, it is 86%, and for marketing students, it's 79%. Then we have three tasks building on those information. First off, determine the probability that students find a job. We could add independent of their study program. B, assuming you meet a student that found a job, what is the probability that he studied HRM? And finally, at the university, there are 4,000 students. How many students study MA and how many will find a job directly after finishing their studies? Well, let's work through these three parts step by step. And we start with the first one, which simply is what is the chance, what is the probability that someone will directly find a job after his studying is done? Well, what do we know? We know from the exercise that we have the probability that someone will find a job conditional in regard to different study programs. And for each of the study program, we have the probability that someone will actually study in this study program. Well, if we look closely, we see here those probabilities, those shares more or less, add up to 100%. And we can also decently well assume that someone only studies in one study program, which also makes sense, else they would not add up to 100%, but would be slightly larger. But well, we can assume that the different study programs, therefore, are so-called disjunct sets, meaning they fully cover all students and no student is assigned to more than one of the three different groups. Whenever we have this and we have conditional probabilities based on these probabilities here, conditioned on these events, then we can use the theorem for total probability to actually calculate this total probability here. So the unconditioned probability for finding a job after the studies. For this, we're simply going to multiply the conditional probability with the probability that the condition takes place. So we're going to multiply this with that, and this with that. Then we're going to add up all of these different parts. This will look as follows. And then we can put this into the calculator, giving us a final result of 87.28%. That's also a value which looks decently well. Why can I say this? Well, because the total probability is something like a weighted average of the conditional probabilities. So in other words, this value needs to be the average, weighted average of these values. So it needs to lie somewhere between the smallest and the largest of these values. Well, 87% definitely lies between 79 and 91%. So that's a good guess that we did our calculations correctly. Well, that was already part one. So let's turn to the second part. Here in the second part, what we're looking for was the probability that someone studies HRM under the condition that he already found a job after a certain period of time. So if we recall the last slide, we already have a probability where those two are just the other way around. So if we take a look, we know the probability of studying HRM and the probability of finding a job. We know from the exercise text, this we know from part A, and we also know from the exercise text the probability of finding a job when they have been studying HRM, so under the condition of studying HRM. So what we want to do here is more or less switch these two, switch the condition and the probability what we're looking for. Whenever we're going to do something like this, good guess, good starting point would be the theory of Bayes. Well, that's what we're going to try out here. For this, we're just going to write down the probability with the switched parts, multiplied with the probability of what is here, the condition, divided by what is here, the condition. So divided by what is the condition in the value in the probability we're looking for. Well, we have those three values actually written down up here. We have this one, we have that one, and we have this one. So we can insert the three values and we get as a final result 36.54%. So the chance that someone studied HRM when he found a job after a certain period are roughly 36.54%. Well, that's already everything there is for the second part of this exercise. So we can turn to the third and final one. Here, we're actually looking for how many students out of the 4,000 fulfill this property. So we have to first calculate the probability we're looking for and then multiply it with the number of students, giving us how many students actually fulfill this. Well, we want to know how many of these students study management. And we also want to know how many students study management and find a job. So we need these two probabilities. And then we're going to multiply these probabilities with the 4,000 students. So, well, what do we have? We know the probability of studying management, that's 60%. We already know, also from the exercise, that if someone studies management, they have a chance of 79% of finding a job after this period. So we can use this information, these two, to calculate the second of the probabilities we're looking for. Well, how do we get this? Well, we simply use the formula for the conditional probability and we solve this for that probability. Now it looks as follows. Conditional probability times what is the condition of the probability, conditional one. So these two multiplied with each other give us here a probability of 12.64% of doing management and finding a job. Well, we already have the share of students who study management. So we can simply multiply the 4,000 with the 60% and the 4,000 with the 12.64%. So we're going to multiply those numbers, giving us a result. 640 students study management, and out of those 640, well, 505.6, so 506 students study management and find a job. That's not conditional and find a job. So they've done already both of these things. Well, that's then everything there is to this exercise. I hope you enjoyed it. I say goodbye and see you next time.